All right, so this is the last phylum of worms we're going to look at, annelids or segmented worms. So a couple of things to talk about here. There's a picture of an annelid. When people think of worms, they're typically thinking of the earthworm, which there's a great specimen of that. And this is what we dissected in the class as well. So one thing that is prominent with these are called metamerisms or segmentation, and segmentation will allow for specialization. Worms have these particular types of worms, annelids, have very clear segments, which allows for there to be different things going on inside their body as opposed to just nothing. And so you see this particularly as animals evolve and you have arthropods and other organisms. These segments are going to allow for greater specialization. They have a true coelom, which again, the coelom is completely lined with mesoderm, which you see here. You have your gut, and here's the body cavity completely lined with that mesodermal tissue, as opposed to a pseudocoelom, which is only partially lined, or an acoelomate, which has no coelom at all. Before I talk about setae, I'll talk about where they live. They're found all over the place, marine environments, freshwater environments, and terrestrial biomes that are moist, so they have to stay near water. Most of them have these appendages called setae, and appendages is kind of loosely used here. They don't have any internal attachments, but they do kind of act like appendages in the way that they use them. They use them to swim, or they can use them to like anchor themselves in the ground. If you think of an earthworm, if you've ever tried to pull one out of the ground, it doesn't really want to come out. That's because it anchors itself with these little hooks here. These, I guess, they're probably like collagen or chitin, some sort of hard structure that allows them to anchor themselves from predators, actually, like a bird or something trying to get them out of the ground. This is going to keep them from doing that. And they'll anchor to each other also during sexual reproduction. So let's talk a little bit about their body plan. They have a two-part head, which you don't really see in this picture. I do have a better picture of that. And this two-part head is the prostomium and the peristomium. This particular class has a very clear that, but they all annelids have this two-part head. Prostomium is the kind of above the mouth, and the peristomium is like around the mouth, is what those words literally mean. The terminal portion of the worm is called the pygidium, which I don't see that on this picture either. But this section back here, the pygidium is basically where new segments are being made. And so if you look at an annelid, the oldest segments are going to be towards the anterior region or toward the head, and the newest segments are going to be towards the posterior region or the tail. Most of them are filled with fluid, very similar to roundworms. They have a non-living cuticle that they are surrounded with, and they have this coelom that is full of fluid that acts as a kind of hydrostatic skeleton. They have a gut that runs the whole length of the body, like we saw in roundworms, and they have dorsal and ventral blood vessels, and so they have a closed circulatory system with kinds of hearts. These are called pumping vessels here. Aortic arches is what you'll see most of the time, but it's a kind of a rudimentary pumping vessel. And then they have this thing called the Clitellum, which is a reproductive structure that we'll get more into when we talk about oligochaetes and Hirudinidae. But first, we'll talk about polychaetes, which are all marine segmented worms. This is the largest class of annelids. For a little bit on their body plan, they have this very clear differentiated head, clear differentiation between the prostomium and the peristomium, very clear head in general. A lot of these guys are predators, and this is going to help them, with these nice big jaws and things. They have the parapodia, which just means like pair of feet, and so these kind of act as their appendages. They have no clitellum, so this is going to distinguish them from the other two classes of annelids. They have a very clear differentiation in the gut, having a clear foregut, which is like the first section of the digestive system. Think esophagus, stomach in our own bodies. The midgut, this is where the digestion is actually occurring, and then the hindgut, which is going to connect to the outside and deal with solid waste removal. There are mainly two groups of these. There are the errant species, which are more free living and predatory type, or free moving is a better way to think about that, because they're not parasitic at all, but they're able to kind of move in the water column and eat, versus these more sedentary versions, which kind of stay in one place and filter feed. Most polychaetes have two sexes, or so they're dioecious, and reproduce sexually.